Well then folks, here we are. The last episode of the normal races before we have just 4 endurance races left. So it's a bit of a sad day, but also as you may see on screen, I've spent a lot of time re-going through all of the races which I hadn't won. So now it's all victories. On Friday I drove about 483 miles getting all of those victories again, which is about 777 kilometres of driving, which was a mixture of fun, and some of it definitely wasn't fun, some of it was quite annoying actually. But today is going to be important as well, because not only are we going to presumably unlock the last endurance, which I believe is the 6 hour of Suzuka, so I've been told at least, and that's probably the one which I'll do first once we get to those 4. But also we should get a bunch of prizes as well. So we've got the, obviously the next race I'll have 900 stars, so that'll be 1,000,000 credits. Then we've got the other stuff over here. So all we've got left to do is the 1,000 horsepower at Deep Forest and the Autopolis GT500. So I think I fancy doing the Deep Forest first. Of course, that gives us a 6-star roulette ticket as well. And let's jump straight into it. So for this time, I'm going to... we kind of saw before that the Skyline was a lot easier than I thought. But I think for this time, I might actually try the Gallardo. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get all the stars done between the last episode and this one, which I wasn't sure I'd be able to get it all done, but thankfully I did, is because once we start the endurance races, I don't really want to be like in the menu, oh, look at the stars and all that. I feel like for the endurance races, we want to get in with it, get into the race, get on with it, and they're going to be long videos, so you don't want to be wasting time, really. So, if we end the practice, I will say one of the good things about going over some of those races again, one of them in particular, it was actually the worst result. I thought the worst result I'd had was, in fact, since we're only doing these 2 races, I'm actually going to qualify, because I don't want to have to do these multiple times. But one of the things which I definitely noticed, speaking of qualifying, when I did a few of them, was that some of the events, even on this quote-unquote lowest level of difficulty, you basically have to qualify. Because even on the lowest one, at least for me, and I guess this will vary depending on how quick of a driver you are, even though I'm always quicker, certainly on this level, than everything else on the grid, sometimes I'm not enough quicker to get past everything else without qualifying and beat the leader. If my best lap is like 1 or 2 seconds ahead of something, for example, and you've only got 5-8 laps or something like that to catch up, it's just not enough time. And I can get up to second, as of course in previous episodes I did plenty of times, but for that actual victory, I found that it was just wasting time trying to climb up the grid. And if you're going to qualify, you may as well qualify first, obviously, which really isn't that difficult. And part of the reason why I'm actually kind of glad that I went over some of those events again is because it allowed me to approach playing them in a different way to how I have been in the episodes. Because obviously in the episodes I'm talking and driving, which I must admit passes the time like crazy compared to when I'm just focused on doing the race. It's actually quite wild how much longer it feels to do some of these races when you're not talking. But it also made me realise sometimes just how, I would say just how bad, to be honest, the AI actually is in some of these events. And it's definitely brought to mind a few points, some of which I've actually written down for when I do my ultimate... What is going on with the brakes on this thing? That was horrific. When I do the final review for the entire DLC, which will obviously be after I've done all of the endurance races, so basically like episode 23 kind of will be the overarching review, I made some notes for it, and going back, like I said, was quite good, because it gave me that second perspective doing some of the races again. I definitely wouldn't redo any of the others, I don't think, because it's not really worth it in terms of cash anyway. But yeah, realising just how much, well, BS there is really with the AI half the time. And as another prime example of the whole rubber banding problem, and I don't even know what you'd call it, because it's not really rubber banding, but I spoke about this in a previous episode, where you'll have that one car that's really quick until you pass him, and then, oh, magically he's not as quick anymore. Funny how that happens in so many different games. What was I saying about that? I lost my train of thought then. Basically, it really made me notice that even more, because in a few of those events I would be categorically quicker, and then I would qualify sometimes significantly faster than the next car. Like, I'm talking sometimes it would literally be 5 or 6 seconds faster than the car in second place in qualifying. But then, see, second place, and that was a bad lap, so that's fine. But then in the actual race, despite me being 3, 5, 6 seconds quicker in qualifying, somehow they're right behind me. And it's like, really? Really? Sure. It's not the end of the world, obviously. Much like, qualifying third at the moment, and I'm sure it'll probably drop down 1 or 2 more. It doesn't really matter, though, because anything in the top half of the pack, it just saves so much time. I don't regret not doing the qualifying in the previous episodes, because I feel like on more than a few occasions that would have gotten really boring for you folks. And I will say 2 of the races that I had to go back and do were particularly annoying. Number 1 was the Nürburgring. It was the single lap Porsche. No, not the Porsche Challenge. It was the one where you can drive a Porsche GT2 RS. I can't remember what the race was. But it's the one that I actually had the worst result of any of them. I believe I drove the BMW M4, which was the 2 Pepper anyway. And I got like 13th. So really bad result, really. And I found that even despite the fact that choosing the easier car, the Porsche, and obviously me loving the Nordschleifer, I still just could not catch the car that was in the lead. And here's the funny thing. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Not only could I not catch the car that was in the lead, he was consistently 10 seconds ahead, even as I moved my way up the grid. And then, on the last straight, the car was still pulling away from my GT2 RS in terms of the live, time distance. And yet, miraculously, when I then spent the extra 15 minutes that it takes to do the outlap and a qualifying lap, which that's a totally separate rant. I hate the outlap being a thing, because it makes even doing a test drive completely pointless. But after doing that much extra driving, what do you know, magically, the car is not only now not as quick as me, because of course now I'm ahead of him, but also, I'm going to put that on a 50-50 split, but also miraculously, somehow, even on the straights, his time didn't close in, despite the fact that when I'm trying to catch him, he's pulling away on the straights. Funny that. I don't like that. It's like, again, what are you exactly trying to showcase here? This is supposed to be an improvement on the AI, and I have to say, I don't recall noticing Sophie 1 or 2. I don't recall if we had access to Sophie 1 or not, or if that was just in the live events, but definitely Sophie 2.0, which I've used plenty of times, to be honest, in custom career mode events, certainly for more than a few car reviews that I've done in GT7. I don't recall that ever really bothering me much. It was a nice challenge, and it makes for an interesting looking replay. But Spec 3, or not Spec 3, but Sophie 3.0, I don't like it. I really don't like it. And even stuff like this, it's like, who is this supposed to be for? Because the way you structure the races with no penalties and stuff like that indicates that you're trying to have a little bit more slack for players who... Are you done? For players who aren't quite as bothered about things being done professionally. But then at the same time, you have stuff like that happening, or the fact that these cars ahead are just miraculously quicker for no apparent reason, which is exactly what I was just talking about. Like, oh, look, I qualified right behind them, and that was despite me having a bad lap, and now suddenly, even with a lap where I'm not doing that, they're still miraculously ahead. And once again, my car has no brakes for no apparent reason, because of course it has no brakes for no apparent reason. So again, who is this for? And replaying these races has just made me so much more angry about this whole DLC, to be honest, because there is not only such a ridiculous mapping of what's so-called the easier versus the more difficult, but there is no consistency whatsoever to how these cars perform, and there is no consistency whatsoever to how difficult the multiple peppers are, or aren't, as the case may be. I mean, look how this race is going. Why exactly is that car gaining when even with a bad lap I was right behind him in qualifying? What's that about? Aside from just BS that they've put in there to try and push you to drive faster or to annoy you or whatever the purpose that this whole thing is doing, it just came into so much more sharp focus for me when replaying it. I mean, what is the point of not just driving as I just did? There is literally no reward for driving properly. There is no reward for being a good driver. In fact, the reward that you have for being a good driver is you have the game constantly undercutting you, blocking your line, taking the racing line, making it annoying rather than making you drive it faster, having lead cars which are inexplicably quicker for no apparent reason when they are categorically not the rest of the time, to the point where what's the point of not just doing this all the time, bouncing around the entire corner, and just driving as if this is Gran Turismo 3 because you're not rewarded for being a good driver. And clearly, they don't care if you do that because you're not penalised for driving that way either. So, what exactly are you trying to showcase to us, Kaz? Because if you're proud of this, well, it kind of says a lot, to be honest, if he's proud of this. Because this is not an improvement. Sophie 2.0 was already superior. This is bunk. It is some of the worst AI I've seen in a modern game, and that's even compared to Forza, because even with Forza Horizon, at least you know it's going to rubber band. There is absolutely no reason not to just smack these AI cars straight off of the track, and just block them in, box them out, because that's exactly what they do to you. What's the point of being a good driver? You're not rewarded for it. Your reward is, as I said, that they just treat you like a moron. What's the point? And when I'm not going for a victory, aka most of the races, I don't really care too much, because it's more about the entertainment factor and the fun of playing it and talking to you folks. But when I'm actually trying to get a victory, it really brings into stark focus just how stupid so much of this feels. And it's definitely going to affect my final review, to be honest. Which is a shame to say. I mean, look at this. Does this car actually have brakes? Am I, opening the driver's door and sticking my foot on the floor? What exactly are the brakes in this car supposed to be for? Because they sure as hell aren't for slowing the car down. Again, compare this to driving the Skyline, which was supposedly the 2-pepper challenge, and I didn't do any wall riding, I didn't have to bash any cars out of the way, I didn't have to box anyone out, and I got the victory. I mean, look at this thing, it literally cannot turn corner. What's the point? This car does not turn, and it's with a 50-50 split, so let's change that to a 40-60. Let's see how that changes things. And once again, despite my qualifying lap, again, can't turn, doesn't brake, doesn't turn. It's like driving a planet with a wing on the back. Is this supposed to be fun? Get lost. This is the stuff I'm not going to miss. Yeah, how about you slow down sometime today? It's actually quite laughable how bad some of this really is. And part of me is glad that it hasn't really come into as sharp of a focus until now, because I feel like this series would have been miserable. Because if I actually cared about getting those victories every time, I just braked before the flashing red. And that is the result. That is how bad this car is. Unacceptable. That is unacceptable. That's not a challenge. That's not an AI improvement. That's just a garbage car which has no enjoyment to driving it against the computer, which is doing whatever the hell the AI is doing. And once again, we've got this one car that's inexplicably the only one that can keep up, because of course. I would actually say that Sophie 3.0 is quite possibly the single worst thing I've seen in GT7's development so far. From release until now, it is the worst showcase and the worst change I believe they've made to the game, at least that I can think of. I can't think of anything else which is as close, even anywhere near, how genuinely awful this is. It is pathetic if this is supposed to be a showcase. And I know there are some people who disagree. There are some people who actively like Sophie 3.0. Well, I'm glad you're getting some enjoyment out of it, because I guess you must have grown up playing games that I didn't. I mean, I grew up playing stuff like Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition. I mean, I may as well put the brakes on when I pass the start line, really, if I actually want this car to slow down in any kind of realistic way. I mean, if a Lamborghini handled like this in real life, there would be none left on the road. And it's not like this is a Diablo or a Carrera GT, which is known for being challenging. This is just a Gallardo. A powerful one, but still a Gallardo nonetheless. Pathetic. It's just pathetic. And then we'll see how this goes with the Super GT event after. I don't know, man. Just seems like an unfortunately sour note to end off the normal races with, but hey, you guys know me. I say it as it is. If this is how I see it, then I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I, of all people, am definitely not going to sugarcoat it when it comes to polyphony. And I feel like, for the most part, I've been fairly positive going through this series. But, yeah. Who'd have thought that going to actually try and be a completionist and get all of the victories would be what it took to realise just how bad of a DLC this actually is. Yeah. So I just braked in a joking manner, basically, at the start line, and it barely slowed down enough for the corner. Why don't you go ahead, because I am going to deal with you once and for all. Because once again, it's clearly what the game wants. And the only time the AI actually shows any actual skill is when it's doing stuff like that, trying to dodge you. If only you put as much effort into actually driving properly, the AI might actually be interesting to race against. If I could describe the AI with one word which encapsulates literally everything about how I feel and everything about the display that I've seen here as a showcase, which is what it supposedly is. Something which describes how it's used, how it drives, how the differences are in choice of the 1, 2 or 3 level. At least a word that I can use in this video without bleeping it out. It would be arbitrary. Everything about the AI 3.0 is completely arbitrary. They've grabbed stuff out of the sky and just made it whatever they feel like. The skill level is all over the place. Not just between 1, 2 and 3, but literally between events. I had events that I redid yesterday which were a cakewalk. I mean, recently, before I even redid them, look at the last episode. I think it was the last episode at Catalonia. You want to slow down sometime today? Yeah, nice of you to join us. That episode where I did the Catalonia race, 2 peppers, and it was a walk in the park. And I don't even like Catalonia. What's going on there? And then you get something like... I mean, the first one that comes to mind is always the Civic event, but even that, going back, as I've alluded to earlier on here, I didn't find the Civic race difficult to do because I just wall rode it. I bounced off all the walls and just did it like I would in Gran Turismo 3 or 4, because why, there's no incentive not to do that. Unless you, unless you specifically have, like a code of honour or something to how you drive, which the AI sure as hell doesn't, so why should I? I don't know. Anyway, so my plan moving forward for the endurance races, which, boy am I looking forward to them, is I'm probably going to try and do those on 2 peppers, I reckon, because I feel like on 3 peppers it just gives the game too much of an excuse for all of this, and on 1 pepper it could potentially just be too boring, because I don't want to get so far ahead that there's just nothing interesting happening, especially in something like a 24-hour race. I just broke before the bridge, barely ready for the corner. Unbelievable. So the plan is I want to do Suzuka first, then Spa, 8-hour second, and then I would be curious to hear your thoughts on this one. I might even put out a vote on the community part of the channel as well to ask this. Should I do, for the final episode, aside from the review, but should I do an episode where, or should I do Le Mans last, or should I do the Nürburgring last? The Nürburgring, of course, being GT cars, and I'm really getting sick of driving this car. I'm not going to miss this, and I've only driven it once. Should I drive on Le Mans last? Oh, sudden burst of speed, have we? How interesting for you. Enjoy the wall. Should I do Le Mans first? Nürburgring first? There you go, that's more like it. Nice try trying to get me to spin out as well. But not today, chum. Because I think for me personally, I feel like I'd like to do Le Mans first out of the 2. Because I feel like even though the cars in Le Mans are more interesting to me, being Group C, and that feels more appropriate to end with, On the other hand, I feel like the Nürburgring is like known for being the ultimate challenge, you know, the green hell. So even though it's GT cars, I feel like ending off with that could be a cool idea. But like I said, give me your thoughts on that. And the plan is going to be, and this will be quite fun to do, is like I said, I'll do Suzuka first, and I am definitely going to change up the format in terms of scheduling, because there's no way I'm going to be able to do, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I think I already mentioned in a previous episode that I'm going to aim to do the 24-hour races probably on a Saturday, because I feel like more of you will be available on a Saturday if you do want to, you know, jump in and out of the live stream or have it on in the background, but also it's a lot easier for me to do it because that tends to be the day that I can. Ironically, today, well, I'm recording this on Saturday, so today being Saturday, I was busy, where I'm not usually. So hopefully Saturday will be free, but we'll have to see. So my plan is hopefully I'm going to aim to release the, because you'll be watching this on, well, if you watch it on the day of release, Wednesday. So if I release the 6 hour of Suzuka like next Monday. Really? Really? Something else you'd like to share maybe? Would you like one of the wheels to fall off perhaps? So release that one on Monday, then try and get the 8 hour one done somewhere around a similar time, and then release that one like the following week, because obviously for the 24-hour races we'll have to separate those by a week anyway. There's no way I'm going to want to do those back to back. So probably midpoint of February I would imagine we'll probably be done with the whole thing, and yeah, get the review out at a similar time as well. I don't think the review will be crazy long because a lot of my thoughts have already been in these individual videos, but I want to do the review as kind of like a closing chapter to this little saga, and also to kind of compress down all of these various positive and negative thoughts which I have about the DLC. Of course, answering the question, at least in my opinion, of whether it's worth buying and what it was like to play and things which I think I should have done differently or better or not done, blah blah blah, in more of a concise way than, you know, not everyone has time to be watching 20, 45, 50-minute episodes. So, yeah. And, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we get anything more like this in future. I could kind of see it happening, but also I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't. I feel like this could easily be the only expansion for GT7, and, I mean, if it ends up being like a second version of this, spoiler alert for the review, I guess, but that wouldn't bother me, not having another one. It's kind of funny to me how Gran Turismo so often portrays Lamborghinis as being distinctly bad to drive. It's almost like they have a vendetta against them in a veiled kind of way, because the Gallardo is kind of known for being a bad car to drive. In fact, in GT6 it was also pretty bad, so it's not a recent thing. The LP640 and the Reventon, they're also usually quite bad. There was a reason why, after all, I was surprised how good the LP640 drives in this game versus how it drove back in GT6. I feel like the only one which is really any good to drive straight out of the box is the Urus, which is kind of cheating to say that because it's just, you know, an Audi SQ whatever underneath, so it kind of feels like it's not even a proper Lambo. It isn't a proper Lambo, but you know what I mean. Whereas if you compare that to Ferrari, I feel like most Ferraris are pretty good. Pretty good in Gran Turismo to drive. Some of them might be more challenging than others, but they never perform like that did then. Good. Well, thankfully I won't have to do that one twice. 5-star ticket. And that should give us, I think, a couple of prizes, I think. It's going to be interesting to see, because obviously I haven't unlocked the Suzuka thing yet, but it's going to be interesting to see what vehicles we're using. I'm going to guess maybe Super GT500s for that one, but we'll have to see. And the 900. Nice. So $1 million credit bonus. 6-star ticket, and if we jump over here to clear this one out, Very nice. And as you can see, my credits from the last episode to this one jumped up a little bit from redoing a few of those events, or more than a few events. I can't actually remember how many races I had to redo, but it was quite a lot. And now we have our final one, the GT500 at Automotive. And what do I feel like driving? I'm going to drive this, because as we just saw, the zero pepper is a lie. So let's skip this. Another really annoying thing that happened. To be honest, I mentioned earlier on there were a couple of races that really annoyed me. One was that Nürburgring, and the main reason why the Nürburgring one annoyed me is because of the sheer amount of time it takes just to get a qualifying lap. But the other one which really annoyed me, and it was, again, this might actually be the single best race in the entire DLC for showcasing just how broken this entire thing can be. Not always is, but certainly can be. The Laguna Seca. One of the very first races I did in the series, with the 3 muscle cars that you can choose, the Camaro, the RS, and the, what was the other one? The Mac 40. I seem to recall the first time I did it, I think I used the Mac 40. And I think I came 5th or something like that, and that was fine at the time. But trying to get that victory was so annoying, because not only did I have to obviously qualify, but the Camaro is garbage. It is genuine garbage. It's one of the worst supposedly easy cars to drive. It's got like barely 480 horses, which doesn't feel like much for a Camaro. And still, it's kicking the tail out all the time. All of the other cars, especially those Hellcat Challengers, always catch you on the straights. The amount of times I did to them what I just did to the Nismo and just spin them out because I couldn't be bothered with it. It just wasn't enjoyable. And it's like, again, I thought we were playing Gran Turismo 7, because this feels more like Need for Speed Most Wanted, or Carbon, but not in a good way. In fact, at least in games like Need for Speed or Midnight Club, obviously Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition is kind of known. I didn't qualify. Yeah. I'm going to have to redo that, unfortunately. Sorry for that. But, yeah, there's no way I'm doing this and getting a victory without qualifying. There's going to be too much rubbish getting in the way, so let's do that again. Thankfully, it doesn't take very long to get back to that point. I bet you were screaming at the screen that whole time. But yeah, let's focus a little bit more. This is something which I found so annoying as well, redoing them all. All of this. Practice starting. Practice ending. Qualifier 10 minutes. You don't say. I can read. I can see what's on the screen. I'm well aware of what we're doing. Qualifier. Time limit 10 minutes. Thank you for telling me 17 times what we're doing. How about we just get on with it? There's so much filler in this DLC. It's unbelievable. And speaking of filler, it goes back to the point that I was just making about Laguna Seca. On Laguna Seca, I went out and did my lap, got a time, exited back after doing, of course, 2 full laps, which isn't the most time in the world, but that's not the point. Only to realise that, of course, I'd done those 2 laps in practice mode, so it meant absolutely nothing. Because I don't need to practice, I already know the track. So now I had to do those qualifying laps, in effect, again, because I, and of course it's on me, did those laps in the wrong section, which I feel like there were a few comments, I think, mentioning a similar sentiment to this, but get rid of the practice. We don't need it. And most of these events have such a ridiculous amount of time to practice. It's like literally an hour in some cases. Who on earth is doing that? But also the qualifying gives you more than enough time. You can get probably a good 3 or 4 laps in most cases out of just the qualifying. So why would you need to practice? It's this weird, it's almost like an OCD, slavish adherence to trying to be like the structure of a real race, and it just comes off as a job's worth. It comes off as like try-hard nonsense. It's like, oh, we're going to do a practice session so that you can test your car, except you can't do anything to your car, so who cares? It's a track that you've probably driven on hundreds of times because nobody buys the DLC without racing in career mode anyway. And oh, by the way, the qualifying is a totally separate thing, but it's exactly the same for all intents and purposes, except now you can qualify. I feel like this is going to be such a jarring left turn from the last episode to this one in terms of how bitter I am. But I told you earlier on, there's something so, like, sobering about doing those events twice. Yeah. It's one of the only DLCs that I've played where the more of it I do, the less I've enjoyed it. And that is not a good sign. That's what I was saying. I derailed myself. This slavish adherence that they have to having, well, real races have practice sessions, and real races have outlaps which don't count because it's not a proper qualifying lap yet. Who cares? Real races also have penalties. That's something else which real races have. Real races don't have other drivers that deliberately plough across your racing line to block you. Real races don't have people that qualify one time and then have a completely different skill level because either they wouldn't be allowed to do that because that would be sandbagging, or they just don't work that way. That's just not how drivers work. You don't have, a struggle to keep up with the front car in qualifying and then miraculously you're now borderline, equal to the skill level of whoever's in the hot seat, if you will, like me, you, whoever, in the actual event. The whole thing just comes off as really petty, and I don't like it. It comes off as, it's nasty. It's really petty, and another term which sums it up nicely, but which I'm not going to say because I tried to keep it a family channel, but you can probably guess the word. Dog. It's just... Nah. I don't like it. I don't like it! Now, let's skip that up. Prime example. So... Ooh, look at you. Faster. By quite a margin as well. Boy, should this be fun. And it is the two-pepper one, but even so. It goes back again to what I said about there being no real consistency, because in one event, again, Catalonia, 2 peppers, and I just worked my way up the grid, didn't even qualify, mind you, and just worked my way up the grid, and got a victory fairly easily. And then you got this, which I'm now in 4th, or something just now, where I didn't qualify, but again... No, I did qualify. On the supposedly easiest setting. And it's like the same result as this in terms of how far down the grid I was. It's just ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. Who did the quality control on this? Because I feel like whoever it was... In fact, I know what probably happened. I bet it was more than one person. And they probably didn't talk. I bet people were assigned different parts. And they were like, yeah, seems alright. And they probably didn't talk to each other. They probably didn't have any kind of consistency. Well, they clearly didn't have any kind of consistency because it isn't consistent in terms of the difficulty level. It's all over the shop in terms of how races compare, how drivers compare. The only consistent thing is that you've got that one car that is always, for no reason, quicker than everything else. And that is for all 3 levels. Stupid. Plain and simple. Just stupid. I genuinely prefer the old school rubber banding method that games used to use, because at least then you knew where you stood. You knew the game was going to just throw some absolute rubbish your way, but you could do that and deal with it because A, it was consistently annoying, but also all of the cars did it. There wasn't just one car, back in Midnight Club or Need for Speed or whatever. There was never one car that was quicker than everything else. It was all of them. And especially in Dub Edition, you make a mistake, most of the time, forget it. You had to basically drive perfectly, certainly as you played and progressed through the game. And that's just an arcade street racing game. And even that was more consistent than this. I mean, what is the purpose of that Supra? Aside from getting in my way, what are you even here for? You're supposedly quicker than me in the qualifying, so where's that performance now? If you're so quick, why am I in front of you? Where's the consistency? Where's the realism? Where's the showcase? Where's the enjoyment? Nowhere to be found. And now, doubtless, yeah, of course he'll go up the inside. Of course. because that'll throw me off my line and make the race take longer, and allow him to, again, block me onto the grass and allow the first place car to get further ahead. Because that's what real drivers do. No, it ain't. That's what real drivers will do once and never be used by their team again, because you're a liability. And if you want to be a liability, well, sorry AI, but I got some ways of dealing with that, and the ways have worked since the PlayStation 1. So if that's the way you want to play it. So, Mr. Serrano, or your AI representation, I thought you were, what was it, 2-3 seconds quicker than me in qualifying? Where's that gone? What's happened to that? Because you ain't that quick anymore, even with the BS of getting in front of the cars behind. Where is it? Give me that sweet, sweet quarter panel. I do like faking them out sometimes, because you can use the AI's programming against it, where it's programmed to dodge you, except, whoops, I faked you out. Wah wah. No thanks. No inside for you. Oh, he's slower on the straights now. How about that? You run out of turbo? You run out of NOS? Or did your rubber band snap? And if you'll notice, this episode in its entirety is actually a perfect encapsulation of why this was the wrong approach to a DLC. If this is how a DLC makes you react, and if the way I've been driving this time is how I drive to get the victory, then it isn't improving me. In fact, you could argue fairly strongly that this is probably some of the worst driving I've done in any episode in terms of sportsmanship. And yet, this is basically the only episode where I've actually been wanting and caring about having victory. What does that say? It says stuff about me, I'm sure, but it definitely says stuff about the DLC itself. I said this way earlier in the series. A DLC, specifically this kind of DLC in a driving or racing game, you'd like to think it's trying to make you a better driver, a more competent, competitive, smarter, patient, tactical, faster driver. I don't feel any different after playing through this. I don't feel quicker. I don't feel improved. I just feel annoyed. Maybe that's what they were going for. Maybe that's what they think a challenge is. Who knows? Because I remember this back in the days of GT4, when we had those really difficult missions, like the mission 34, was it 34? Whichever one it was, going around the Nürburgring in the SLR, or the one which I always found difficult as a kid, the Skyline Slipstream. I never blamed the game. I just knew I wasn't doing well enough. Whereas now, it doesn't really feel like I'm not doing well enough. How predictable of you. And I'm glad you've overtaken. Because now I'm going to do the same to you as I did in the last race. Because that's apparently what you want. Oh wow! an invisible corner. How predictable. And now the car doesn't turn. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? And we're back. I decided to make a bit of a change. I've skipped the qualifying, so at least you don't have to watch that again. Well, I haven't skipped it, but you know what I mean. Skipped most of it. And I've gone for the lower level. So I'm curious to see how exactly this goes this time. Because will this be an actual occasion where it varies in difficulty? Or will, despite the difference of being 3 seconds quicker in qualifying, actually make any difference at all in the race itself? Or will it, folks in the back who want to place their life savings on it, will there be some kind of absolute nonsense in the race itself, which suddenly makes the cars which are 3 seconds slower in qualifying miraculously right up my backside? Because I think it's going to be that one. Let's find out. I need juice. And at this point, who cares about the pepper? Just get the race done. What a way to end the normal races, huh? Bit of a sharp shift in tone. Slap on the old traction control to get off the line a bit better. And that whole thing right at the end, just now, wherein the car just, the Pennzoil, just inexplicably suddenly didn't want to turn after I'd spun out. Well, folks, those of you who bet your life savings, you are now very rich. Get out of my way. How the car suddenly just didn't want to turn. That's happened a number of times. Another event where I really noticed it happening was, I can't remember which event it was in terms of laps, but when I had to redo the Watkins Glen, where you've got either the Corvette, the Viper, or the newer Mustang. I think last time I did it in the series I used the Corvette, which was the 2-pepper. But I thought, you know what, let's go for the easier one and drive the 800 horsepower Mustang. One of the worst mistakes of choosing that car. Because I don't know what it is, but something about that combination of that car and Watkins Glen, it handles like an absolute pig. Far worse than when you get the car yourself, or even when you drive it. I mean, fair enough, it was on Daytona Oval, so you can't really tell, like I said in my review of it. But when I drove it in the review, I thought it was a decent enough handling car for something as heavy as it is, very like stock car-esque. But wow, even with the 800 horsepower and 1451 kilos that it basically already comes with, that silver one that you have to drive, rubbish. And again, 3 seconds quicker, folks, in qualifying. That's what 3 seconds apparently looks like. This episode, ironically, might end up, because of having to redo that, one of the longest, well, not only that, but also the qualifying, might end up being the longest episode this side of an endurance race. But that also kind of seems appropriate for the last episode of the normal races as well, in a funny kind of way. A swan song, if you will. But yeah, what I was saying about that Mustang is sometimes it just doesn't turn. And I don't mean like the tyres are worn out. It wasn't even that many laps into the race. It was like maybe 3 or 4 laps out of 16 or something like that. So there's no way you're telling me the tyres have worn out. And it just didn't turn. Kind of like exactly what that Pennzoil did just now at the end of that race. I was full lock then, and it just straight outside the corner, like the car's just in autopilot, and the game's just decided, nah, we're not going to let you turn anymore. I'd be curious to know if anyone else has experienced that in this, because it sure as hell isn't the tyres wearing out, and there is no damage turned on, and not that I can see, so you can't blame it on that. The car just suddenly has a distinct drop in ability out of nowhere. And sometimes it's later in the race, sometimes it's earlier in the race. Another very interesting rerun that I did, I think I actually saved the replay for this one because I might use it in the review, was I had more return of the dreaded rain in one of the events. When I redid Le Mans, there was no rain, because of course. But when I redid the Spa... which Spa was it? The Spa Group C event? Can't remember how many laps it was. I think it might have been 6 or 8, something like that. I used the Nissan R92CP because I fancied a bit more of a challenge and a bit more fun, potentially. And in that race, I started it and used that little weather map, you know, that you can check before you start the race. And it looked like there was going to be no rain at all in the event. Nothing showing up on the map in the forecast at all. Like from then to now and blah blah blah. Get in the race itself, almost immediately blue coming across the map, and not just a bit, a wall of water basically coming across the map, because of course. And there was no point in pitting in, so I just restarted it. And then next race I checked the weather, map was showing rain, if I recall correctly, so I thought I'll do what I basically usually do in the Le Mans WTC 700 events, which is just slap on some intermediates, because they're more than good enough in the wet. You very rarely, if ever, need heavy wets, I don't find in this game. So slap those on, they wear out a bit quicker, but it should be fine. Not a drop of rain, and the tyres ran out after 3 or 4 laps. Literally couldn't even take a corner with traction control turned on, it was just spinning immediately. So I restarted it again, and then I decided to basically do what the game would do, which is pit to change them during the race if the rain starts. You know, when she tells you, it started to rain. Thanks, Barbara, I couldn't see that. So I pitted in, changed them over, and then a couple of the cars didn't pit. They carried on driving on racing hards in the rain. Not a crazy amount of rain, but rain nonetheless. The same kind of rain where you know my car would have been slip sliding like a skate rink, and they're driving just fine. Bearing in mind I'm now on intermediates, in the wet. Not crazy wet, but in the wet. Wipers are on and everything. And not only am I not catching them, but my tyres are still wearing out quicker because they're intermediates. And that race ended up being a fairly satisfying finish, but still not particularly enjoyable overall, because on the last lap, literally the last lap, it got so wet that the other cars had to drive incredibly slow, and I was on nearly completely used up, if I remember rightly, intermediates, and caught up the time that I'd lost pitting in to change, and got the victory. But it wasn't enjoyable in a victorious, triumphant, I had the right strategy kind of way. It was almost in like I felt like in a spiteful kind of way, you know? And that's just not the kind of feeling I would really put up as a victory from something like a challenge. Like, if that's how it's making you feel, that doesn't feel like a positive thing. Like a, yeah, you got yours kind of thing. Like, really? Is that what Polyphony's going for? Is that how they want to make people feel? Because if so, that seems very odd. And now, of course, despite the fact that none of these laps have been as quick as my qualifier, somehow the cars have gone from being right behind me to now near enough 8 seconds behind. despite the fact that my laps have not been particularly remarkable. So once again, what happened, guys? What happened to the AI? For a company that used to really be kind of the unarguable leader in their category, even once games like Forza, Enthusia, I don't know, whatever else, Project Cars, AC, whatever you want to say, came along, Gran Turismo really has done quite the incredible U-turn in going from being the game to beat to just consistently fumbling the ball, getting things almost right, doing things that could have been better, could have been really good, but you did this. It could have been great, but you did that. And I don't remember that happening in older games. I don't recall there being so many missteps, so many fumbles, so many could have beens. Maybe some glitches, some weird moments, some certainly annoying races where the AI might have felt like it was, cheating or something, but it probably wasn't. Yeah, I don't know. Something's changed. Maybe it's me. Maybe this is all in my head. Maybe the AI is incredibly consistent and very gentlemanly. But sure don't look that pardon me. Sure doesn't look that way to me. Oh, pardon me. That fruit juice is really coming back on me. Be interesting to see how long this episode ends up being. Might actually be over an hour. Might be the first episode to be over an hour. It's definitely going to be close, if not over. I was thinking if I hadn't have talked through the qualifying, I could have skipped and completely cut that out of the last race so you didn't have to watch it. But yeah, it's all part of the experience, I guess. Plus, like I said at the start, one of the main things I wanted to do really with this series was have as close to a one-to-one representation of how long it actually takes as possible. And the only times where I've really made that exception is like just now, when I don't want you to have to watch me qualifying the same thing twice. So I feel like not many people would probably begrudge me doing that. I feel like most of you probably don't mind too much about not watching the same thing twice. I think something else I would have liked to have seen done a bit differently about the structure of these races is sometimes, and this is very subjective of course, all of it is really, but you know what I mean. I feel like some of these races felt like they didn't really need to be included. Like some of them feel like they're a bit samey. Some of the GT500s, some of the tuner events, they feel like they're just kind of filler almost. And what I would have preferred, personally, is maybe having some in-between endurance races, because if you consider how this structure has gone so far, we've literally jumped from races that take almost universally less than 20 minutes to a minimum of 6 hours. And that's just a hell of a jump with nothing in between. And I think I would have personally much preferred... tapping on your brakes, are you? Racing a bit too quick for you. Not quite your speed. Maybe you shouldn't be on the track then. It's like driving behind people in real life. I would have liked to have had some you know, kind of like the endurance races in the older games, like 60 laps of whatever, or I don't know, even like a 3-hour maybe endurance, or a 1-hour endurance, or something like that. And I know you could do that yourself with a custom race, but you know what I mean. Something that's a bit more of a stepping stone rather than just jumping from one extreme to the other. But like I said, maybe that's just me. I'd be curious to hear if anyone else feels similarly. And I think I already mentioned this before, but I really would have enjoyed more rally in here as well. I know rally isn't for everyone, but nothing's for everyone. Because we got the Porsche, we got the Beetle, but really in both forms those are like essentially historic rallying. There wasn't really any like modern rallying, and in a funny kind of way, if they'd have done what I was talking about them doing, including something like a Group B variant of the Beetle, for example, which I think could have been a really awesome car, and certainly would have tied into the real-life Global Rallycross Beetle, that would have been a perfect way to include modern rally in there as well. Even if you'd have used it to, I don't know, replace one of the other cars like the Beetle, or if you did done it, you know, as well, whatever. It just seems like there were a few gaps. What could have been. But hasn't that been the whole story so far? What could have been? What we're on now is about 16 minutes or so in this form. So yeah, it's going to be probably just over an hour, I would imagine, by the time this is all said and done. Plus, obviously, we've got the prizes as well, which is going to be fun to check out. See how many lots of 10 grand I've got. It's funny how a day or two of racing can totally change your perspective as well, because not only, you know, in this form, as you can tell, my demeanour is completely different. I've almost become bitter about this DLC versus before, when I didn't care as much, ironically, about winning. What was I saying that? There was a reason why I brought that up, and I can't remember what it was now. It's funny what a difference a day of racing can make. Yeah, I can't remember now. I think that was basically the point I was going to make anyway, though. That it can just totally change your experience overall. Am I misremembering my qualifying lap? Because I could have sworn I did like a 145 or a 147 or something like that. It can have been a 145. I remember it was definitely a good couple of seconds ahead of the next closest car. I'm actually a bit worried about these endurance races, to be honest, especially the 24-hour ones, because if they end up just making it as much of a slog as these sometimes have been, it's going to be a challenge, alright, but not the kind of challenge that I was hoping for. A nice endurance race should just be a challenge just on its own merit. You shouldn't need shenanigans going on to make it feel like more of a challenge. I also feel like one of the potential problems, and obviously I'm saying this before doing any endurance races, but I feel like one of the potential problems could be if the endurance races incorporate strategy as much as they should. That's also going to be very jarring, especially for people who are, maybe playing this as their first Gran Turismo game. And let's be honest, it's not like those people will have done potentially any endurance racing before, so this is going to be completely new to them, aside from, I guess, the missions. If that's the case, they're not going to have much of a point of reference for what a strategy even is in an endurance race, and jumping from 20-minute races to 6, 8, 12, or 6, 8, 24-hour races, that's a hell of a jump. And you don't need any kind of pitting strategy, really, for these. Told you. Yep, knew it would be. Knew it would be. GT500s. How boring. I'll probably use the Pennzoil on that one. We'll see how that goes. So, 6 hours, I'll do that one first. 6-star ticket. $1 million. And I think... Where's the other rewards? It's saying there's 2 unclaimed rewards. What am I missing? Where? I don't see any unclaimed rewards. 46 races, 46 victories. What am I missing? Am I missing? I can't see where I'm missing something. Nothing's flashing that I can see that is due. Whatever. I don't know. So let's see what these prizes are. Five-star ticket. Let's see what we shall get. Sold a few of the prize cars as well, so I got some nice extra credits from that. Things like $500,000 for the Aston DBR9. And a couple of Ital designs that I needed to sell. I don't think those are from this, though. Wow! I'll definitely use that. 100 grand. No, Daihatsu. $500,000. I'll take that. At least that's more useful. And to round off the normal episodes of this series, I'll take that. You know what? That's a good way of ending it. That is a cool prize. Very cool. I actually like that. Way to put a positive spin on the end of the otherwise fairly sour episode of an experience. So, that is now officially it, as crazy as it is, for the normal races in this series. And the next episode, which I'm not exactly sure when that will come out, possibly next Monday, hopefully, depends if I can get it all recorded and edited and all that, will be the 6 hours of Suzuka. And then the week following, the 8 hours, and then the 24s. So, thank you for joining me on this bumpy episode of an interesting journey, and I'll see you then for that one. But for now, thanks for watching!